Welcome, William F.DeVault. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Well, what did it mean to you to be U.S. Beatport Laureate 2017 to 18?
It was a fine honor. I've got the plaque up on my wall. Very nice plaque. Same as everybody else gets. Um, and it meant that I needed to go to more activities than I usually do. I tend to just sit and write rather than going out.
Mhm.
I even sometimes am resistant to going to readings because uh, too much emphasis is placed on readings nowadays as opposed to the writings.
Mm,
500 years from now, no one will give a damn how good of a speaking voice you had.
hmm
They will give a damn about what you wrote.
Yeah.
Uh, I was very fortunate early in my career to have a critic say, I do not know if this guy will ever make a buck off his work, but I can tell you 500 years from now, a young man will sit beneath a tree with a book of his verse and woo the woman he loves. And that was
Oh,
that was what I wanted to hear. I play for legacy. I don't play for applause. Um, I can be seduced. I can be seduced by applause.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Out
Uh,
in LA, I encountered that a few places, and it was a drug.
yeah. It's nice to be appreciated. Do you feel like performance poetry and written poetry are two different genres? I think they can merge. I
Yes.
think great poetry can be performed well. But sometimes to me, it feels like they're two different genres. What do you think?
I'll give you a name. Charles Lawton. You know who Charles Lawton was? The
Yes.
great actor. He used to go on the Ed Sullivan Show and read from the Bible, and he did dramatic readings that could bring the house down.
Mm,
Very good reading. I've been to a lot of things. I've been to all sorts of competitions. I've been a judge on Poetry Out Loud in two different states. But I, I tell you, the written word to me holds much more fascination than the performance. I think I'm a competent reader. I don't think I'm the greatest reader. I don't even think I'm the greatest reader in my circle of friends. I will not tell those who I know are better than me that they are better than me because then they'll get an attitude. But the um, the written word is a different thing. Written word survives. Why is Shakespeare considered so great? Not because contemporaries of him said, wow, he could really read his stuff, but because a few years after his death, they found a pretty much complete portfolio of his written works. Um, I just don't, I just don't think enough performance poets pay enough attention to the written word and to what it is and what it means. I get so tired of seeing comments online of someone saying, well, so and so wrote this poem, blah, 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 blah. What do you think they meant? And someone proceeds to expound on what the poet really meant.
mm.
When I know that that's not what the poet really meant, because once in a while it's me they're talking about. Um, and that aggravates the crap out of me because as a writer, I want people to understand what I'm saying. I want to resonate with them. If I'm writing in a positive fashion about love, I want people to relate to that. I don't want to hear that he was doing an analysis of the international relations between Guam and the Philippines. No, no, that's not what I was writing. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I don't always understand my works when I first write them because I tend to write heavily in the preconscious. They come out, I write them, and then I go back to them a little later, a few hours, few days, few months, few years, and go, oh my God, that's what I was talking about. I have more than once found out I have fallen in love after reading a poem of my own. And sometimes it was after the person in question was out of my sphere. So it was kind of a sad story. But the word is the word.
Mhm.
Yes, the tradition of poetry goes all the way back to a verbal tradition that precedes written language. Absolutely. But to me, poetry is the written word.
I even saw online one poet who just loves to perform, not a beat poet laureate, so it's none of those people who I don't know. He says you're fake, you're not really a poet unless you perform your work. And I don't think that's right either. There's
Well, I have
room for all of it.
um, somebody who cops that attitude that only spoken word,
Mm.
and until just a few years ago, spoken word wasn't even considered poetry. Um, Person who takes the position that spoken word is superior to the written word um, is a jackass. So,
Well, I enjoy both.
oh, so do I.
Yeah.
I know some poets I love to hear them read.
Well, I also saw in your bio that you were
Oh,
banned in a Catholic girls' school in Ireland. What's that about?
several years ago, a gentleman named Mike, I don't remember his last name, wrote to me and said, "Hi, I work with this program that helps to um, educate through the arts high school age individuals in Ireland. And I work at this one convent school in Dundalk, Ireland. And we're doing a fundraiser for the um, for Valentine's Day, where we are going to print up at the local mall Valentines that people can custom design for whoever they want to send them to." Well, I'll be honest, my first thought was, having been raised on the notion of the quiet man as kind of what Ireland's about, I didn't think they had shopping malls in Ireland. But he said, "Can we use a couple of your poems?" I said, "Certainly. Just let me know which ones." They decided to go just with my poetry and drop the poetry by others, which was certainly their right to do, and I was kind of delighted. Well, about 2 weeks after that, I got an email from him apologetic. The nuns had wanted to see the poetry they were planning to use, and they decided that I was a little too much of the flesh.
Ah,
So they not only said you have to go with other poets instead, but they banned my works at this Catholic convent school in Dundalk, Ireland. And I tell that story from time to time. My mom always hated it when I told that story because it made her feel like her son was, the Antichrist or something. But I got a kick out of it. And I even wrote a poem inspired by it a bit called A Touch of Heather, which is in one of my books, which is about a young girl with a black market copy of her favorite poet and reading it to herself as she explores her emotions and her sexuality. And it got enough attention that when I did a reading in Ballakinwood up in Pennsylvania, a nun showed up to see my reading. And I was like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble now. But she bought 2 books and went on her way. So I guess she didn't find me too evil.
maybe it turned her on even.
That's a possibility.
uh, you were investigated as a holy man by some
I'm
girl.
not going I'm not going to name the religion.
Uh,
No, 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 I will. I will. There is a title called the Maitreya, which supposedly is the reincarnation of the divine spirit of creativity. And if these, I believe it's Hindu or Buddhist monks, think you might qualify, they investigate you. And there's 3 or 4 criteria, and I happen to trigger one of the criteria. First off, you have to be really creative. Well, my catalog is absurdly thick. Second off, you have to have somewhere in your writings said that it is more important to please God and do the right thing than it is to get a reward in the afterlife. And I've said that many times. And that kind of triggers it. The third one is when asked, you have to deny that you're the Maitreya. In fact, rulers used to get someone on their staff to declare that they were the Maitreya. So the ruler could go, "Oh, no, no, I'm not one," so that they could be up for the title. Um, and we went our ways after they investigated me, and I don't know what they decided they were going to do. Um, I may never know. but it was just one of those wacko things that happens in this life. It's like when a woman sends me pictures of herself, um, suggesting that she could inspire a great deal of great poetry from me.
Oh,
If I
really? You have that kind
if
of
I would
fans? Huh?
yeah, if
Oh,
uh if I would spend the weekend with her. And I generally get rid of the pictures and don't entertain the notion, because I have a little more depth than that, but a little more. But just one of the weird things that happens when you're a writer.
well, you were putting poetry on the internet when it was reasonably new as far as home PCs. I guess you were one of the first to have a fair amount of poetry out there. Is that it? Is that how you got named as the romantic poet by Yahoo or somewhere?
In 94, 95, I started writing poetry on AOL, and I developed quite a following. Uh, I tended to write back then, and I still do from time to time, in cycles, 7 poems built around a common theme or phrase. And I was involved with a woman who went by the totem, the Panther. I use totem muses a lot to designate different women in my history. And I put together what was called the Panther Cycles. And by the time it had run its course, there were 93 of them, I believe. There were over 600 poems in it. But one day somebody said, you should put up a website. Well, I'd never put up a website before, even though I have a background in computers. So I took a look at a website. I kind of liked the way it was constructed. Took a look at the code they used to establish the website, and built a little website called the City of Legends, and posted a few hundred poems. And back then, it was interesting. You could go on the web and say, romantic poet, and they would give you actual romantic poets rather than a bunch of SEO steerage. I don't like SEO, search engine optimization. I think that is dishonest and disingenuous. But Yahoo, which at the time was well ahead of Google and several others, um, posted my site and called me the romantic poet of the internet. And I was always told never waste a good sobriquet, so I went ahead and trademarked it. Um, and then that was the one I was advertised under until the NBPF said, "Hey, U.S. National Beat Poet Laureate." Okay, I'll take
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I almost don't need to ask this question, but I wrote as in my notes to ask you about why editors find you difficult. Is there some more info?
You ever seen the movie The Buddy Holly Story?
Yeah.
The Choral Records came to him and said, "We want to put out this record. We'll have to get you in the studio, and we'll have the sound engineers help you record it. And then we're going to have a producer work on it until he has the sound he wants." And Buddy goes, "No, I'm the person who hears the music in my head. I will decide what we record, and I will produce it myself." And they practically kicked him out of the studio for that. Well, I can be a pain in the butt. When I was in high school, they asked me for a poem to put in the student newspaper, and the opening lines of it were, "The human race exists no more, wiped out by its chief predator." And my features editor reversed those 2 lines, saying it made more sense from a journalistic standpoint to say, "Wiped out by its chief predator, the human race exists no more."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "You run it the way I wrote it, or you don't run it."
Mm-hmm.
They ran white space.
Okay. Well,
I got into a fight with a New York-based publisher back in the late 70s. I'd put together a manuscript called Universal Man, and they liked it. But then they started making editorial suggestions, changes that had to be made to it. I said, "Well, you either print what I wrote or you don't print me." They said, "You won't get far with that attitude, so we won't print you."
mm,
And that was when I gave up on being a published author. Then the internet came along and built my fan base at the peak of its popularity. The Panther Cycles there was a mailing list of hundreds of individuals who wanted to see the next cycle as it came out. And that got the attention of the Writers Club leaders who were starting their own press, interestingly enough called Writers Club Press. And they wanted to know if I had a manuscript that they could use, and I gave it to them. And then let's see, sorry, a message that came in just distracted me for a second. I'm always doing 12 things at once. And then a few months after, they printed it, and it was called From an Unexpected Quarter. No, From Out of the City. They were bought out by not Writers Club, by iUniverse. And iUniverse came to me and said, hey, we like your book. Couple things. One, it's a few poems shorter than we would like it to be. Can you expand it? I said, no problem. I said, is it okay if I add a lot more poems to it? Sure. And change the cover? Yeah. And change the name of it? Sure. So my second book was called From an Unexpected Quarter and was about twice the length of the original one. And it did okay. It did okay. But iUniverse soon after that went to a pay model where they were asking people to pay to have their books published. I didn't want to be someone who was encouraging people to pay to have their books published. So I walked away from that contract, and I worked for a little time with Lulu and a couple of the others. And then finally, a friend of mine in the publishing business said, you know what you need? You need to get involved with the publishing house. And a couple of friends came to me and were starting up Venetian Spider Press. And they said, we'd like you to be our first significant author. I said, okay, great, groovy, fantastic. I said, in fact, I'll sign a thing that says I'll only publish through you for a certain amount of time. And they said, great, that's what we want. So that's why I've been involved with Venetian Spider Press since 2017. So I agreed to put out a series of at least 7 books with them.
You wrote a book whose title I'll let you pronounce, about poetry as a religion. Please tell me about that and pronounce it for me.
Koheleth.
Uh-huh.
It's a Jewish word. It's basically the correct way to say Ecclesiastes, which is a book of the Old Testament. And it technically means teacher or preacher. And I have always felt that poetry is my way of dealing with the universe, with God, and with myself, which after all is a definition of a religion. So I put together this book, which is a little bit of an outlier from my regular string of books that I've been doing with Venetian Spider Press, called Kahela. And it's developed a little bit of a cult following because it really basically is saying that poets should be A, 100% truthful, B, connected to the universe, and C, considered teachers, religious figures, whatever, depending upon your individual view of such people. And it was nice to put it out, get that out of my system, cleanse the palate before I finished up my regular run of books with VSP.
And as a closing thing, I would like for you to read a poem for us.
I believe we discussed the notion of resurrect, which is from Tachyon, one of my books with VSP. And as I discussed with you, and we don't have to go in with it now, I love this poem because, like almost all of my poems, I write it in one draft. I don't write it, then rewrite it, then change that word, then change that word. But I read it after I wrote it, and I went, holy crap. It's got 4 million references to people in my past, people in my present, events, attitudes, but I'll let people pick those out by themselves. So are you ready to hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's hope I don't drop out on the microphone. Yeah. Poem is called Resurrect. Laying down a beating where I'd been eating crow. The blows are soft flesh on shattered sapphire, Too many business cards from timid MFAs. Mediocrities polluting Apollonian streams of consciousness. I am sorry that your husband died. I acknowledge that you loved him, and he you. And I am grateful you found joy to your own side of the pillars of Heracles. The fates did not hate us, but allowed us to stumble in blind bindings until we crumbled under the weight of our best pretensions. Cornbread corners to the hollow plates of desire. I was unaware of the demon I found and bound only with your persistent assistance. Born of dragons and chained in cinnabar and pitchblende, pitchfork tongue and the dung of desecration, left in the garden, he calls for you from within his cell, where I starve him with distractions and abstractions while awaiting the resurrection in a reinvented winter that comes for us all, calling us liars as the fires fade and we are paid up beyond the end of the stay we had envisioned when we bought the condoms. The halls and walls are as I envisioned them, described in the romantic's whispers, using words unheard in the most ancient places where the Greek girl said I would find redemption. She was wrong, but drunk at the time, and I do not lay with the mysteries of Dionysius. Fire, fire, fire. Inspire desire conspire with the smaller mind blinded by a scent of honeysuckle and night-blooming jasmine, reeling at the feeling of a greater death of self beyond logic and toxic remembrances that are mangled and tangled. I gave up science and the truth of numbers when I found that I would be always bound by lesser minds, finding no freedom to discover, to uncover the essence of this transient life.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really
Yeah.
nice to get to talk to you.
It was nice to talk to you, and thank you. You asked me a few questions that most people don't ask. I always gripe about interviews. People ask the same 5 or 6 questions, and one of these days I want to get an interview, and I want it to be a hardball interview. I want them to be thrown at my head, and
Wow. I wanted to
that'll
be
be fun.
nice. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Have a great one.
You too. Bye-bye.